So I'm just taking the A7C back to Best Buy, and I thought I would just do a quick video explaining why I've decided to go ahead and return the A7C. A lot of people have many complaints about this camera, but a lot of that stuff really didn't make any difference to me. Take for instance the price. The price is $1,800. I think it stacks up pretty well with the competition in that price range. You have the Z6 II, the Z6, the A7 III, and the EOS R, and you also have the Panasonic S5. And I think that the A7C fits really well right into that category. So I don't think the price is an overall determining factor of why I'm taking this camera back, although of course it would be a no-brainer buy if it was $1,500 or $1,300. Some of the other complaints that people had about it that really just doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me is like the one card slot. Now if you're a professional or going to be using the A7C for any kind of commercial work, the one card slot just not going to cut it. I would definitely require a camera to have 2 card slots if I was using it for any kind of commercial work. But because I'm not, the one card slot doesn't make any difference to me. It's UHS 2, and I just think that's great. So the one card slot's not a determining factor for myself. Some people, they don't like the viewfinder. I found the viewfinder to be adequate, you know. Again, it's not the best in the world, but I don't think it's meant to be the best in the world. I think you're mainly going to be using this camera as a back screen camera. And then also, you know, onto the back screen, a lot of people don't like the quality of the back screen, and it's not very good quality. The pixel count's not that high, but they did give us a flippy screen, which is really important to, you know, solo creators, content creators like myself. I mean, I think that the back screen is vitally important to a camera like this, and they did give us that. So the back screen, again, is not a huge deal of why I'm returning this camera. Another thing that people have complained about the A7C is the specs. A lot of people expected 4K 60 to be in this camera, and yeah, that would have been nice. I'm not gonna lie to you, that would have been nice if they'd have put 4K 60 in this camera, but I don't think that that's gonna hold anybody back. I mean, for me, the specs of this camera are actually pretty good, are just fine. And I get along with it great. Another thing that people complain about a lot is the layout of the camera. There's not very many custom buttons. There's not a front dial. So it's a little bit harder to change your settings when you're out in the field. So that way you're going to be, because of that, you may be wanting to use more of the automatic modes. Not that big a deal. I mean, I just didn't find it to be a huge deal when I was actually using this camera, because the way I look at it, every cut that they made is to reduce the size. And that's what I really has enamored me about this camera, is the size of it. And it's really one of the reasons why I'm having a hard time, really having a hard time returning it, because I'm in love with the idea of this camera, but I'm not just so sure that I actually like this camera itself. Now, one of the main reasons that I'm returning this camera is because of the grip. While I love the small form factor of this camera, I love the size of it and everything, you still have to put full frame lenses on it. So when you start putting full frame lenses on this, the camera gets a little bit heavier, front heavier, and the grip becomes, in my opinion, just too small to be able to balance out those larger lenses. Now I know, you know, many will say, well, you can get the small compact primes or the kit lens, all would be a good fit for this camera, but I don't have those lenses, and I don't plan on buying those lenses because ordinarily they just wouldn't be something I would ever buy, and you know, so I'm not going to buy them just specifically for use of this camera. But when I started putting some of my zoom lenses on, which is what I like to use for travel, it just became apparent that the grip that was actually on the camera is just not enough to get a good purchase on the camera itself. And it made it really kind of uncomfortable to hold over time. So to try to remedy that, I bought this cage and small rig. And if you can see here on the front, it gives you a nice bigger grip. But by the time I added this cage, my camera suddenly became a really small, lightweight setup. It suddenly became just about as big and as heavy as my A7 IV. So the cage itself, while it's nice and it does its job, it kind of negates the purpose of a small, lightweight, full-frame camera such as the A7C. The second reason I decided to take this back is because I simply cannot keep it steady when I'm filming handheld video. It does have the steady shot in it, and it does help a little bit. And I know that you can run the footage through Catalyst Browse, but when you're just wanting to take a little simple shot like this, you know, or just little quick, short little videos, and you can't keep your camera steady. I mean, it's just shaking all the time. And sometimes just little micro shakes, you know, which is kind of even more distracting than, you know, gigantic shakes. But no matter what I could do, I just could not keep this camera steady. Maybe it's I have shaky hands. I don't know what the case is, but I'm just not willing to run every clip that I film that's not on a tripod through Catalyst Browse. That's just something I'm not interested in doing. I thought to myself, well, if I can just, you know, when I'm walking, you know, run those shots through Catalyst Browse, but, you know, if I'm sitting here filming something like this, I still can't keep it steady. So, I don't know, it just, to me, they really should have included active stabilization in this camera. It would have made it a no-brainer purchase, for me anyway. And it's really puzzling why they didn't add active stabilization in this camera. It's in the lower end cameras like the ZV-1, the ZV-E10, and they put it in the super high class cameras like the A1 and the A7S III and the A7 IV, but they kind of left it out of the mid-range cameras like this. And that's really a shame, you know, because I think a lot of people would move on to a camera like this if it had active stabilization in it. It's just so important. I don't have to have the most steady footage of all time. It don't have to look like it's come from a gimbal. And that's not really what I'm after. So the active stabilization, you know, from what I've used, just seems to put a nice degree of steadiness into it. Like having active stabilization in this camera would have made a difference for me, but it's not in there. So just one of the reasons that I'm returning it. And the last reason I'm returning this camera is because of this. Can you hear that? These little camera straps just rattle around non-stop. And what's funny about this camera is it came out after the A7S III. They fixed this on the A7S III. So Sony knew it was a problem, fixed it in the A7S III, and then came out with this camera after the A7S III, but they left these crappy strap holders on there just to save a few pennies. I mean, it couldn't have taken more than 10 or 15 cents more to fix this problem, and they knew it was a problem. And to me, that's pretty much just that's a crap move by Sony, if you ask me. And I just can't support something like that. I just think it's crappy, you know, just to save a few bucks. I've enjoyed using the A7C, and I think for a lot of people, this will make a great camera. If you're gonna, you know, set up the camera on a tripod and just film your YouTube videos, or you have time to run everything through Catalyst Browse, I think it is a great camera. But for me and what I want to use it for, I just don't think it's the right one for me. That's my little thoughts on the A7C. I'm glad I finally bought it. I'm glad I tested it out. But I'm sorry to say it has to go back to Best Buy today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.